Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. Today's presentation is entitled Covering First and Second. For those of us that have officiated basketball for a long time, or even for those of us who are new, generally when we start our basketball officiating career, we will officiate with another official known as a two-person crew. And as we grow rather in our development and improve our skills, eventually we will progress to higher levels of basketball where we will referee with a three-person crew. Some of us go so far in our promotion and in our career that for the remainder of our career, we work with three-person crews exclusively. Some of us continue to work with both two and three-person crews. As we progress, sometimes we still work with three-person crews exclusively, but every now and then it requires us to go back to a two-person crew. Sometimes we're really good at three-person crews, but not used to having only a two-person crew. Sometimes we work two-person crews all the time, but not used to having a third person in our crews. This presentation will answer a question that we often do not tackle, and we should. Should we call or not call in our partner's primary coverage areas? And should our partners be allowed to call in our primary coverage areas? For the remainder of this presentation, I'm probably going to use the abbreviation PCA to refer to primary coverage areas. So right off the bat, should we call on our partners PCA? Yes, no, or maybe. What do you think? Can you answer this question right away? Do you need not go further in this presentation? For the rest of us that do need to go a little further and that do need to take a deep dive analysis, let's continue. This excerpt is taken from page 72 of the 2020-2021 NCAA Collegiate Women's Basketball Mechanics Manual. Oftentimes you will hear this referred to as the CCA manual. And for the remainder of this presentation, you will often hear me refer to it as the CCA manual. Basically, this excerpt is saying that the primary official has first dibs when a foul or violation occurs in his or her primary, and they should have the only whistle. On fouls or violations that are very obvious to everyone, if the primary official, or sometimes we call this the covering official, does not have the whistle, then another official should have a cadence whistle and make the call in his or her secondary area. Here are some wise words from a fellow official, colleague, and friend. Know your primary, work hard in your primary, and if possible, trust your partner. What do you think? Are these words of wisdom that can apply to you not only in officiating but in life? Here's some terminology from the NCAA Women's CCA manual that will apply throughout the rest of this presentation. Let's remember that our goal is to be objective observers of the play in the game and in the contest, and to make accurate rulings on the plays that we see. In other words, our first job is to get the play right. That may require the primary official to make an accurate ruling on the play. That may or may not require a secondary official to make an accurate ruling on the play. Again, should we call on our partners PCA? Yes, no, or maybe. From the knowledge that we have attained so far in this, presentation. Do you think you can answer this question? Let's dig a little further. Let's talk about primary coverage areas. Wouldn't it be nice if we knew what they were? Let's take a look. For those of us that have the privilege of refereeing two-person crews, this is the diagram for two-person coverage. We have a lead official and we have a trail official. Notice that our trail official has a large area to cover. So let's focus on the lead's coverage area first. Notice that our lead has the entire lane area going all the way to the free throw line, extended. It is bordered by the end line and the sideline, and it forms a rather large rectangle. This is a lot of area for the lead to cover, but it pales in comparison to the remaining area that the trail has to cover from the free throw line extended to the sideline all the way to the division line, including the free throw line semicircle and the area outside the lane all the way to the other sideline and bordered by the end line. An analysis of the two-person diagram shows that the trail has to cover more than 50% of the front court. So it's very reasonable that we could have double whistles as well as calls coming from the secondary official. The intersection of these PCAs at the free throw line extended make secondary calls highly probable. And think about it like this. If you are either the lead or the trail and the action is occurring in your primary, if the players turn away from your line of sight, it is a almost 99.9% chance they're going to turn to the site of your secondary partner. And this alone will increase the possibility of secondary goals. This is the three-person diagram for National Federation High School and NCAA men. Notice that our lead has half the lane area going to the free throw line extended, just inside the three-point arc, and is also bordered by the end line. Notice that our center official has the remaining portion of the lane bordered by the remaining part of the end line. Free throw line extended somewhat, going all the way to the sideline, but then he or she has an extended area going all the way to the division line and just bordered by the free throw semicircle. The trail has the remaining area in the front court. We see that an addition of a third official lessens the chances of secondary calls in comparison with what we have seen with a two-person crew. However, please note that there are places where all three of our primary coverage areas intersect, and that is in the middle of the free throw line extended. So it does make the possibility of secondary calls probable. In addition, because the lead and center officials' primary coverage areas intersect not only at the free throw line extended, but they also intersect in the middle of the lane. So they also make secondary calls possible. This is the diagram for three-person for NCAA women. It is also used for high school in the state of Georgia. The difference between the coverage area for NCAA women and NCAA men that we notice that our lead official now takes half the lane going all the way to the sideline, including the three-point area nearest to him or her, which is also bordered by the free throw line extended and the end line. The center has the area coverage we discussed earlier, which is the same in NCAA men and National Federation of High School. The trail has the same area that we discussed earlier, but no longer has to cover the 3 point area bordered by the free throw line extended going towards the end line. So here are reasons why it may be necessary to call in our secondary areas. It is necessary to call in our partner's PCA because maybe the primary official is not refereeing the defense. Refereeing the defense is key in every play, in every matchup. If one of the secondary officials is constantly ball watching, if we're ball watching as a secondary official, then we're not paying attention to potential action happening with the matchups in our area. Which leads to the next point. If we're ball watching, then we can't be refereeing the defense as secondary officials. If we're not getting open angles on our matchup, if we're not attempting to get to the airspace between the offense and defense, in order to referee the defense, we must get to the airspace between the offense and defensive players. If we are not hustling, body language is everything. If we are not getting to our initial positions when there is ample time to do so, and that ties in line with not hustling, not getting good open angles on our matchup, and not refereeing the defense. All these are interrelated. Sometimes plays occur in the intersection of multiple PCAs, as we discussed earlier when we were viewing the diagrams of the 2 and 3 person crews. If there are multiple players obstructing our views, if violations occur in the lane or the post matchup that the primary official is officiating. Sometimes, if you officiate in bodies, you cannot officiate feet or location. If you're officiating feet or location, sometimes it's hard to officiate bodies. If one of our partners is constantly and consistently missing obvious fouls, while we would hope that this is not a reality or possibility in our games, we must be prepared to address that. If we are late on rotations. And speaking of rotations, if we are rotating when there are drives to the basket, or when we are rotating while the shot is in the air. If we are rotating when the shot is in the air, then we are messing up rebounding coverage. Screens. It is already challenging enough to referee on ball matchup and 2 people. Then when we add 3 and 4 people to the mix because of screens, that becomes even more challenging. So we must pregame to see if we have the ability to referee multiple people on ball and off ball matchups resulting in screens, or would we like the assistance of our partners to help us officiate screens? Now, why do we call outside our perimeter? Sometimes we shouldn't, because we don't trust our partners. Do we have reasons not to trust our partners? Or is it just that we are impatient? Because we don't see the start and development of a play in its entirety, but we see something crazy on the finish and we are reactionary and blowing the whistle. Or perhaps we really don't know our primary coverage areas. Maybe we're still in a 2-person crew mindset even though we are working 3-person. So what are some plays and situations that could result in us calling in our secondary coverage areas? Rebounding action in the lane when our shooter is not being contested or there's no closeout on said shooter. Passing crash plays in general. On passing crash plays, once the offensive player passes the ball and we have a crash, somebody has to officiate the displacement or potential displacement. Somebody has to officiate the pass. Whose responsibility is that? And what happens if we have a passing crash and the pass goes into the lead's PCA for maybe a potential shot? A post player and a primary defender in the lane. What happens when they turn away from lead and turn towards our outside official or officials? Screening roles in the PCA of the outside officials. Screening roles and screening is a part of our game. Pass breaks. Plays that occur in the intersection of multiple PCAs, be it the intersection of the PCAs at the free throw line extended for 2 and 3 person, be it at the intersection of the middle of the lane for 3 person for our lead and center officials, and other places where our PCAs may intersect. Loose ball action, where the ball is on the floor and opposing players are attempting to possess the basketball. Are we ready to make accurate rulings on this play, being held balls or fouls? Violations in the lane during post player ball matchups or with the post player ball matchup. Are we ready to rule 3 seconds? Illegal dribble, traveling, free throw lane violations. We all have responsibilities during free throws. Drive to the basket, where the primary defender is still involved in the play, whether the primary defender is beaten or not. If we have a drive to the basket, more times than not, our lead official is going to have a secondary defender. So who's responsible for the primary defender getting back into the play? Curl plays, trapping defenses. What is our coverage for trapping defenses? And are we ready to make calls on all these fouls and violations if the primary official is unable to make an accurate ruling on action in his or her area? So, what should we know before we start fishing in other people's ponds? How about the clock? Do we have definitive knowledge of the clock? How about the shot clock? Do we have definitive knowledge of the shot clock? The number of timeouts remaining for each team? The foul count for each team? Our key players in foul trouble? The level of experience of our partners? General provisions as written in the National Federation High School Basketball Officials Manual, which we will make reference to in the remaining portion of our presentation today. Do we know our own PCA before we go into the PCA of our partners? And are we there to actually officiate the game and not just there to collect the check, or not just to walk one end of the floor and not ever cross the division line to go to the other end of the floor? The biggest question for me are making calls on our partner's primary coverage area covered by rule. The 2021 National Federation of High School Basketball Officials Manual does an outstanding job of defining the roles and responsibility of all of our officials in their coverage. So, in the remaining portion of our presentation, we're just going to outline a few of the rules where some of this information is located. Some of this information is also located in the both women's and men's CCA manual. Here are some items of note taken from the high school basketball officiating manual that might help us confirm whether we can or cannot call in another official's primary coverage area. Rulings may be made outside an official's primary area, but the primary coverage official should be given the first opportunity to make the ruling. Exceptions for non-basketball plays which are flagrant or unsporting. These should be ruled immediately regardless of whether they are located within one's primary area. Officials must thoroughly pregame on and off ball coverage in areas where coverage intersects. Does that sound familiar? Have we mentioned that in this presentation? Each official is responsible for all tries for goals in his or her PCA. So if a shot is occurring in your PCA, more times than not, there should not be another pair of eyes on your PCA for a shot attempt unless the covering official has left the shooter and we have a contest or challenge or a closeout on the shot or shooter. Both officials are responsible for ruling on violations. Typically, an official shall rule on violations in his/her PCA, but any violations observed shall be ruled. A word we probably should add into here is obvious. With regards to two-person, both officials are responsible for contact rulings, essentially fouls or incidental contact. All three officials are responsible for ruling fouls. Again, probably a good word to add to here are obvious fouls. Typically, an official shall rule fouls in his/her PCA, but any foul observed shall be ruled a foul. While the PCA official is more likely to make the ruling, either official may recognize and sound his/her whistle for a held ball. Let's be careful about double whistles. The thing we should do when we blow a whistle is look up and meet the eyes of our partner or partners first to make sure that we don't have a double whistle, or if we have a double whistle, that we are in communication with each other before we make a ruling, and to make sure that our rulings or accurate rulings, in this case, match. And if we're not sure, we should have communication before making a final decision. If possible, we should yield to the official who has primary coverage, but let's be prepared to make a ruling or accurate ruling in our secondary should it be necessary. Are we ready to answer this question? Should we call in our partner's primary coverage area? Yes, no, or maybe. The answer is you will decide this in your pregame. Somewhere in this presentation, I think that has been mentioned already. We thank you for taking time out of your day, evening, or night to view this presentation. We hope you've gained some valuable insight and knowledge from this that you will take back with you in your basketball officiating career. We are open to constructive criticism, to feedback, to honest feedback, to questions, suggestions. Do we need to make any additions to this presentation? Do we need to remove anything from this presentation? Please feel free to contact us. Thank you once again for spending some of your day, night, or evening with us, and have a great rest of your week.